Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Journey to the Draft podcast. Chris McPherson joined alongside Fran Duffy on this Monday, recording a little earlier than usual this week. So just to get right into the feel of it, because we're only 38 days away from the 2019 NFL Draft. Fran, where do you feel like you're at in the process right now?
Wishing that there were 138 days left.
You're always going to want more days.
Always want more. See, like I always go back and forth on, I'm at this stage and it's going into the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Game. It's easy because it's like, all right, I got to watch the guys that are going to be at this game. Going to the Combine, it's all right, who are the guys that I haven't watched yet that are going to the Combine? Then you get out of the Combine and it's you don't have like that next big event to get to. So I always
you
get
have the draft itself.
Yes, but I get stuck in that like nether region of like, okay, do I want to go back and watch guys that I haven't watched yet? Do I want to go back and watch guys that maybe I've got differing opinions on after seeing them live at the Senior Bowl or seeing them work out at the Combine that I want to go back and double check on guys, just finish up some reports on guys? I go back and forth and right now, I'm at the stage where I'm making second passes on guys. That's where I'm at right now. But it's a battle.
I ask you that because our good friend Ben Fennell, who did a great job with you during the fall on the Journey to Draft podcast, he posted over the weekend, look, if you're not at the Florida Tech part of the NFL Draft, move on. You're done. Move on to 2020. It's too late to get caught up. So I was trying to figure for you, would you rather be more solid on the guys who are going to be discussed at the top of the draft, or do you want to know those diamonds in the rough, so to speak?
I go back and forth, and really I typically wait on the random Florida Tech guys until I see like a crazy pro day. Like if I see like a crazy pro day result, then I'm like, all right, I got to make sure I go back and watch this guy. But it's funny, Ben, and Ben's probably listening to this, Ben will get on me because it'll be like a Thursday in October and we're getting ready to play the Cowboys and we've got like 40 minutes to spare between shoots or something. I'll say, hey, let's watch Morgan State versus North Carolina A&T because I know Morgan State has a lineman, Josh Miles, that we got to watch.
Certainly.
And so he'll get on me because I want to watch the random small school guys back in the fall. But
you already have a lead. That's the thing.
Yes.
It's not like you're just going to put in every single college. Like Ben was at NFL Films, I think, late last week, and he was posting some random, I shouldn't say random college, but
he's a sicko.
Yes.
There's no ways around it. Ben, you're a sicko.
So that's a great way to start off the podcast. So we're going to get into the latest Buzz news with Tony Pauline as we do each and every week in our Draft Buzz segment. Lots to get into, especially with the news regarding Montez Sweat with apparently a pre-existing heart condition, how that might impact his draft stock. We have one of the best draft analysts in the business in our Mr. Relevant, Dane Brugler from The Athletic. He just recently revealed his top 100, his updated top 100 big board. So we'll kind of get into that where he has different guys placed on that list. And, of course, it's the first wave of free agency is in the books. So where do the Eagles stand? Where do some of the other teams stand? We're going to delve into that and more. And we'll also get into your questions in our draft mailbag. But as we kick things off each and every week, let's get into some draft buzz courtesy of Tony Pauline from draftanalyst.com.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
One of the most fun segments anywhere you listen to any podcast is our weekly segment with Tony Pauline from draftanalyst.com here for our weekly Draft Buzz. And Tony, obviously we're getting closer and closer to the draft, so much more juicy rumors, gossip is coming out. And we want to start with one of the big things that came out over the weekend. And Montez Sweat, he's really helped himself in the whole pre-draft process, going to the Senior Bowl, outstanding workout at the Combine. Everyone's projecting him to be a top 15, top 10 selection at this point. Well, Ian Rappaport from NFL Network puts out over the weekend that he has a heart condition. Do you have any insight into exactly what that condition is and how that might impact his draft stock?
Yeah, I think he said it was a pre-existing heart condition. Do I know what it is? No, and I think it's probably going to be kept close to the vest because of HIPAA rules. I spoke with a couple of people in the lead-up to this podcast about it, and they said, it's something to look into. It's something that's, may raise some red flags, but they don't think it's something to worry about, and I would agree. Because if the Combine medical doctors thought it was serious, they would not have let him work out. We saw it a couple of years ago with Star Luther-Laley, who had a minor issue, which was a result of the flu. I remember probably 12 years ago breaking a story on a tight end from Northeastern University when Northeastern still had a football program by the name of Brian Mandeville, who was a top tight end prospect who they found something at the combine, and he basically had to retire on the spot because of the fact that the wrong type of concussion to his chest may have killed him. As far as Sweat's concerned, it's probably something that or what they tell him, it's something that's going to have to be inspected a little bit more closely. I don't even think he's going back for a combine recheck. Star Laley didn't go back for a combine recheck. Mm-hmm. So what will happen is when Montez Sweat goes out on his official visits, that's something that the doctors, the team doctors, whoever bring him in, are going to take a further look at. And the fact is, with medicals, it's all in the eye of the beholder. Some teams will say this is not a big deal to us. Some teams may say, "Hey, listen, this is a minor concern to us. We're going to downgrade him a half a round or a full round." From what I'm hearing right now, it's not a big deal. If they had not let him work out at the combine, I think it would have been a bigger issue.
So, Tony, for the fact that this is coming out, and you've been, a draft analyst, you've been the best in the business for 20 years, so you know how teams work the draft with these kinds of nuggets and news getting leaked. Do you think this was done by a team to try to push him down at all? To try to make, maybe a team that's in the teens that maybe won't have a chance at Sweat unless he slips for some reason, be able to maybe now have a chance at him? Why do you think that this came out the way it did?
Well, because most times medical stuff comes out, well after the combine, because we don't know what's going about it. As far as, your theory, could a team have put this out there because they hope that, it may force Montez Sweat to slide? Well, that's a good theory, but a team that's selecting in the top 12 who wants Montez Sweat aren't going to be scared away from this unless their doctors do an exam on Sweat and they say, this is a problem. I would advise against taking this player because of this situation, whatever it may be. We usually don't hear about the medical conditions until after the fact, unless a guy with Star Laley, if you remember Austin Seferian Jenkins that year we were there, they wouldn't let him work out. It turned out to be because of a potential stress fracture in his foot. Unless the player is prevented from working out because of red flags that combine doctors raise while the prospect is there, we usually don't hear about the medical situations or medical red flags until weeks after the combine. So this is basically par for the course.
All right, so big thing right now. Combine's in the rearview mirror. First wave of free agency is done. So now we're getting to the pro days. And Tony, you've been doing a great job at draftanalyst.com of hitting on who's been shining at each of the pro days, and we want to touch on some of them. The first one I want to hit you on here is Oklahoma, okay? 4 draft-eligible offensive linemen. You've projected where you think each of those players are going to go. Can you kind of give us a recap of where do you think, Cody Ford and the like, where those guys are going to be selected in the upcoming draft?
Right now, Cody Ford looks almost like a lock to be a first-round pick. Could go as early to the Giants at 17. I've mentioned him with the Philadelphia Eagles in the past with their pick in round 1. He's a big, dominant blocker who was terrific in position drills at the combine. People question whether or not he could play tackle at the next level. I think he kind of quelled a lot of those fears. So I'd be surprised if Cody Ford gets out of round 1. Bobby Evans is a day 2 pick. Didn't have great testing numbers, but looked good in position drills. Teams love his versatility. He could play any of the 4 spots on the offensive line but center. I think teams are basically settled on the fact that they feel he can play left tackle at the next level. He's going to go somewhere in day 2. Ben Powers is a little bit of a wild card right now. He's a big, strong, small area guy, doesn't have the athleticism or the range of Cody Ford or Bobby Evans. He's probably more early part of day 3, more of your conventional throwback type of lineman. Drew Samaya, he's a late-round choice. He may end up as a priority free agent. Samaya did not have the senior season most had expected. You go back on the 2017 film, he looked like a legitimate middle-round choice. Did not play well as a senior, did not do well at the Senior Bowl, which a lot of people are concerned about. He has the ability, so if you get him in the late rounds, the very last 7th round, and you're able to get him back to where he was in 2017, you could have a bargain on your hands.
Tony, for the continuing the pro day discussion, I know Wisconsin had their pro day last week. I think it was the same day as Oklahoma's, actually. I know you had put a lot of reports out about every team in the NFL had their offensive line coach at one of those 2 spots. But I want to talk about the Wisconsin defense. They had a linebacker, TJ Edwards, a guy that I've been high on throughout the process, didn't work out at the combine. ran 4.8 at his pro day, and that's one of the downsides to not running at the combine is you don't get a chance for a redo after running at his pro day. How much will the 4.8 affect TJ Edwards? What does that do for his stock?
It's not just the 4.8. It's the fact that it was a 4.8 in the low 230s. So what I had reported and what was told to me, they think that TJ Edwards has to play closer to 250 pounds. If he's at 250 pounds, he's probably going to run a 5 flat in the 40. So the 4.8, I think, at 200 in the low 230s really hurts him. Right now, TJ Edwards, who was considered a middle-round pick, the big question about TJ Edwards the entire time was his speed. Or the lack of it, and we see he doesn't have much speed, so he's probably going to be a late-round choice.
All right, sticking with the pro days once again, Terrell Hanks. We saw him at the Senior Bowl. Came in all rocked up. The question with him is going to be, can he really add to that frame? It seems like he may have maxed it out, but the New Mexico State linebacker Terrell Hanks, he couldn't run in the 40. So is he going to stand on that 4.9 that he ran at the combine, or is he going to try to work out again leading up to the draft?
Yeah, it wasn't a 4.9. It was a 4.99. It was almost a 5 flat. What I'm told is he's basically going to sit on it. I was talking with his people last week. They spoke with coaches that said, we know he's plenty fast enough. We've seen him on film. He plays fast. He may not time fast. I got my concerns about that because he's not a big frame guy. As you say, he may be tapped out. He does play a little bit faster, but even on film, he doesn't show great pursuit speed. He's more of a guy who makes plays with his instincts, with his head, than he does with his physical skills. And you can do that at the next level, but the fact is if you do that and you're running the 4.99s at linebacker, you're not going to be a top 100 pick.
All right, so from one small school player that has hurt himself from the workout portion of the pre-draft process to a small school prospect who has really helped himself during this last few weeks, and that's Shawn Bunting, the cornerback from Central Michigan. I remember when he first declared, Tony, that you were right on top of it as a potential day 2 selection. I remember watching him right when he declared as well, right at the end of the college football season. I was really, really impressed with him. So I'm excited. I saw that you tweeted that he would be a high round 2 selection. I wanted you to see if you could expand on that. I know he's worked out very, very well over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, he's one of the fastest rising cornerbacks right now in the draft. You got your top 3 guys, and there's even some contention as to who those top 3 guys are. Greedy Williams, Byron Murphy, and is it Trayvon Mullen of Clemson. Then after that, it's anybody's guess. Rock Ya-Sin has moved up draft boards. A lot of people like Kendall Sheffield, although he's not going to be able to run before the combine. A lot of people like Justin Lane of Michigan State. I think with Bunting, you get an outstanding size. He goes 6 foot a half inch, 195 pounds. He's got arms that are 32 inches. He ran the 4.42. He's a very good cover man now who should be terrific 2 or 3 years down the road. So I would be surprised if Bunting makes it out of the initial 45 selections.
All right, Tony, someone who was very impressive from an interview standpoint at the combine. This was Vanderbilt cornerback Juan Williams. He's a Nashville native. Talked a lot about, possibly playing for the Titans, the draft going to be in his backyard, what that meant to him. It was very, very impressive when he met with the reporters there, but he did not perform well in terms of his workout at the combine. However, he did improve his 40 time at his pro day. Do you think that he has an outside shot of being selected in the first round as a result?
Short answer is no. And I liked Juan Williams. If you read my stuff over the summer, I said he was a potential second, third round choice then, but he ran a 4.55 at pro day. And while 4.55 is better than the 4.64 he ran at the combine, it's still not a blazing fast time. It's still something that's going to raise red flags as far as his deep speed. He's got outstanding size. He's got good ball skills. I think he's a bump and run cover. I think he's also a guy you can stick inside at safety. But I just don't think with that sort of time you're going to look at him as a first round choice.
Tony, we're going to take a look around the division a little bit. Obviously, we're a week into the new league year. Free agency has come and gone to the start of it. So really wanted to talk to you about the rest of these divisional teams, the New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Washington Redskins. Let's start with the New York Giants. Obviously, a lot of movement there with that team. A lot of different rumors now flying around. They now have 2 first-round picks. Let me put the situation to you. Is there a better chance that they take a quarterback at 6, that they take a quarterback at 17, or that they don't take a quarterback at all in the first round? What is most likely to happen in your estimation?
Right now, I think they take a quarterback at 6, and I think it's Dwayne Haskins. I know there were some reports that they're not doing a lot of work on Dwayne Haskins, but the fact is this: I think Haskins is a perfect future quarterback for him. I think he's a quarterback that Pat Shurmur could work with. I think he's a quarterback that would benefit from a year on the bench or a year on the sidelines, which is basically what the setup they have with the New York Giants, as Eli Manning's going to finish his career out there. I don't think they're going to get a good quarterback at 17. So I really think right now it's six or bust for the Giants. People keep saying, well, maybe they wait till next year to get their quarterback. You keep waiting to get your quarterback, you end up with the patchwork at the position, and you end up passing on a lot of quarterbacks or signal calls that you wish you had taken. So I think right now, to answer your question, it's at number 6, and it's Dwayne Haskins.
Let's head down south to Washington. They did acquire Case Keenum from the Denver Broncos to possibly be a bridge guy at the quarterback position. Do you think that they're going to potentially address quarterback in the first round, or after losing Preston Smith in free agency, is edge rusher going to be the top need for them in that first round?
So I think the big thing with the Redskins is what happens with Josh Rosen. When we were at the Combine, I had reported that if Josh Rosen is available via trade, the Redskins were going to go after him head first, and that's still true. So we got to see what happens with Josh Rosen. I don't think that they take a quarterback in round 1. I think they could take a receiver or a pass rusher. The problem if they take pass rusher, it means this will be the third year in a row that they took a defensive lineman in round 1. You continually overload the position. You put yourself in salary cap hell. I can't see any quarterback worth taking there in the middle of round 1, but these are the Redskins, so you never know.
So, Tony, last year at this time, you were all over Dallas's interest in Leighton Vander Esch, the linebacker from Boise State. I mean, you called that shot back in, January of that year. So, you obviously have some kind of an idea of where Dallas is looking. Where do you think their eyes are on right now? Obviously, they don't pick until the second round at 58 overall, but where are their priorities at this point in the offseason?
And that makes it a little bit more difficult, because they don't have that first-round choice. I still think, even though they put the franchise tag on DeMarcus Ware, I still think they're going to look defensive line. I think they'd like to get another young pass rusher in there, if not another maybe young defensive tackle. I know that the tight end came out of retirement, but if a good tight end is staring them at the face in round two or one of the other rounds, I think they would also go tight end.
All right, so last but not least, our mock draft roundup, and I was actually hoping to do an all-encompassing mock draft roundup for PhiladelphiaEagles.com, but a lot of them are still pre-free agency, so they really haven't taken into account the free agency moves. But Ben Solak, we had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago from the Draft Network. He just did today. He dropped a new first-round mock that was, took into account all the big trades and all the acquisitions. And for the Eagles at number 25, drum roll, please. He has Houston's Ed Oliver falling all the way to number 25. Tony, your thoughts on Ed Oliver potentially being a Philadelphia Eagle?
I think it'd be great, but I think there's no way it's going to happen. I think it's insane. The way people were overrating and overhyping Ed Oliver back in October, November, when Fran and I were doing the Journey to the Draft podcast, I think they're underrating him now. They've gone from one extreme to the next. The only way Ed Oliver falls to 25 is if the former Houston Cougar coaching staff throws him under the bus. If we find out that what we saw on national television, where he ran off the field at halftime arguing with the coach, was a constant event at Houston. Otherwise, he's too good of a defensive lineman really to fall that late in the draft. Defensive linemen, especially defensive tackles, go much earlier than people project. It's a priority position. Again, in this case, I think we've gone from one extreme with Ed Oliver in overrating him and comparing him to Aaron Donald and saying he's the first pick of the draft, to now underrating him and trying to manufacture holes in his game to say, well, this guy who just 5 months ago, we said could be the first pick of the draft is now the 25th pick of the draft. There's going to be a happy medium. I still think he's a top 12, top 15, top 12 type of player.
Houston coaches may have to literally throw him under the bus for him not to be a top 25 selection. Another intriguing player who was right there, staying with defensive tackle, and this is a Fran Duffy favorite, Christian Wilkins from Clemson. So if you're on the clock there, Fran, who would you go with? And Tony, I'll ask you the same question.
Man, I mean, I guess you have to go Oliver, but I love Wilkins. There's no way both those guys are there. There's no way.
Okay, Tony, your thoughts?
Right now, if you go to draftanalyst.com, I actually have Christian Wilkins graded right there with Ed Oliver. So They're very close. In fact, they're neck and neck. So I don't think you could go wrong with either. I don't think, again, I don't think either are going to be available at 25. But let's say both are available at 13. I don't think you can go wrong. You can say one is a reach over the other.
I would say Wilkins is a safer pick, I think.
I think Wilkins could be the better pick because he's got the better body. He is probably as athletic as Ed Oliver. He's a sturdier guy who can hold the gaps. Again, go back to what I said, back when we were talking about this in September when the comparisons were made to Aaron Donald. Ed Oliver's not a real sturdy defensive tackle. He's a first-step lineman. He's more of a three-technique type of guy who will get swallowed up at the point by blocks. I wrote about this literally last June when I did my Houston write-up. He's very good at what he does. He's incredibly athletic. He looks almost like a linebacker running down ball carriers in space, but he needs a free shot off the snap. I mean, if he doesn't beat opponents with that first step off the snap, plays over for him. Whereas with Christian Wilkins, he has the explosion, he has the athleticism, he's good in space, not as good as Ed Oliver, but he's got the power, he's got the bulk. So, again, go back to Montez Sweat with the medicals. It's all in the eye of the beholder and what you're looking for.
Tony Pauline, draftanalyst.com. Definitely check it out as we get closer to the 2019 NFL Draft. Great stuff as always. Thank you very much, Tony. Up next, Fran and I are going to discuss in our Pick Six players with ridiculous production in their college careers.
Now it's time for Pick Six.
All right, for this week, Pick Six players who just had absolutely ridiculous production at the college level. Pretty simple exercise. Simple, yeah. even for me, because it's pretty much you're finding the guys who just had stats that just blow you out of the water. But there are a lot of guys who would fall into this category. So, for this exercise, I want to dig up some names that we haven't talked about as much. Some of these guys, look,
like we're not talking about Jalen Ferguson. He broke the sack record.
Okay, and I'll get into specifically why I didn't bring him up when we talk about our guys in a little bit. But I'll let you kick things off here.
So I went with one of my guys in Daniel Wise, the defensive tackle from Kansas, who started 41 games over his career. So you think, all right, well, he's gonna have good numbers. Well, he had 43 tackles for loss, like more than a tackle for loss per game over the course of 41 starts. You see guys that maybe they have 1 year of starts under their belt. They start 13 games, and maybe they have 17 tackles for loss, and it's like, wow, that's really good. But it's hard to do that over the course of a career, and that's something that Daniel Wise did
and
during
as
his
an
time
interior
with
lineman,
yes,
too, on top of it.
Really, really impressive. 17 sacks to go with it. I love Daniel Wise on film. That's the thing is, when I look at production, I want production to match what the traits that I see on film, to match the character, to match the combine, to match all those things. You want to just check boxes. Mm-hmm. And to me, with Daniel Wise, you check a lot of boxes, and production is one of those boxes that you do check with the senior from Kansas.
All right, so my first one, I'm going to go at the quarterback position, okay? And everyone knows about Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins and Colin Murray, the guys at the top of the draft class. Yep. This is a guy who's probably not going until day 3, and it's Brett Rypien from Boise State. And you might recognize the last name, unfortunately, if you're an Eagles fan, because he's the nephew of Mark Rypien, who was the former Super Bowl MVP for Washington. Brett was a prolific high school quarterback in the state of Washington, went to Boise State, and immediately made an impact as a Mountain West Conference Freshman of the Year, and eventually became the Offensive Player of the Year by his senior campaign. So when you look at the numbers, 64% completion percentage, very, very impressive right off the jump. And again, this is someone who has the 4 years of experience there at Boise. He produced 13,578 passing yards. And if you really want an impressive number here, 90 touchdowns against only 29 interceptions. So over a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. So right from the jump there, that's why I selected Brett Rypien as my first player who had ridiculous production in college.
I like him on film, too. I think he's going to be a nice backup. I think he's going to stick in the league for a long time. I thought he had a good week of practice down at the Shrine game. So, Brett Rypien is a guy I'm a big fan of as well. I'm going to go opposite side of the ball. I'm going to go with Juan Thornhill, the safety from Virginia, a favorite of both you and I, former corner. And, again, when you look at overall production, this is a guy who started every year during his career with the Cavaliers, started as a corner, then moved to safety. With defensive backs, and this was the thing I pulled, I believe Daniel Jeremiah I had heard him talk about this a few years ago. he doesn't just look at interception numbers. He looks at ball disruption numbers. So he combines pass breakups with interceptions. You get that number. That's your number of ball disruptions. Juan Thornhill has more ball disruptions than any safety in this class. He's got 39, 13 picks, 26 pass breakups. For a guy that was a 4-year starter, that's a really, really good set of numbers there.
Very impressive.
For a guy, again, you're checking a lot of boxes with Juan Thornhill. Film was good. Senior Bowl was good. Character's good. Combine was good. Really, really like Juan Thornhill.
It's interesting because it seems like, and maybe we get into this with Dane Brugler, a guy we can bring up. I keep reading, third round. I'm surprised he's not going higher because of the versatility, the production, all those things. Like you said, he checks off, it seems like, every single box. It's what's keeping him from that upper tier.
To me, I think he's going to go higher than I think he's going to go higher than what the media think right now.
Interesting. All right, my second player, was a running back in high school in Ohio, but very, very undersized, so only got one FBS offer, and that came from Massachusetts, UMass. Now, he was a track star in high school, and we all know about Denzel Ward, who was the 4th overall pick, I believe, a year ago to the Cleveland Browns. He beat Denzel Ward in the 100-meter and 200-meter sprints in high school. And this is Andy Isabella, and we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he just lightning fast, straight line speed down the field, was able to create amazing separation with that speed. And if you go to the actual numbers in college, 231 receptions, which is very, very impressive right off the jump, for 3,526 yards and 30 touchdowns. Really only one other receiver in this draft class, and that's one of your favorites, Keyshawn Johnson, is in that same class, that same tier in terms of production. But the touchdown numbers, the yardage numbers, yards per reception, Andy Isabella with that lightning track speed, which he's continued to show throughout the process here.
4.31, right?
Yeah, 4.31, which was funny because remember, it was initially reported like a 4.5 something, but there was a malfunction with the timer. But Andy Isabella, someone we've talked about a lot here on the podcast. He's my second guy for not just the physical traits, but the production to back it up.
I think a lot of people kind of pigeonholed him as like the undersized, quick, shifty slot receiver.
Exactly.
Where he's much more than that. I'm a big fan of Andy Isabella. My last guy, I'm going to go, you mentioned a guy, Isabella, that was a high school running back. I will go with a guy who is a running back, and that is Devin Singletary from FAU.
Okay.
Stupid numbers over the course of his career. And over the last 2 seasons, 54 touchdowns over the last 2 years, led all of college football. Now, the downside of that, he's touched the ball 587 times over those last 2 years. So the mileage, that's going to be one of the big knocks on Devin Singletary is, how much mileage is left there on that kid. But I love his lateral agility. I know he didn't work out great at the combine, but this is a guy that, to me, excels at making that first man miss. I love his lateral movement. He can impact the passing game as well. Does need to get better in pass protection, but this is a guy, to me, he can be a lead back. Now, he's a little bit smaller, but he can be a primary ball carrier. We've seen a lot of guys come out of the NFL or come out of college at that size and go on to NFL success. He's a guy. He's short, but he came in at over 200 pounds. He's not small. So I'm a big fan of Devin Singletary and what he brings to the table. I
know Daniel Jeremiah has comped him to LaShawn McCoy. Have you seen that?
Yeah, because of the ability to make that first man miss. I mean, his lateral agility is very shady-like for sure.
All right, so my last player, and we were talking about Jalen Ferguson at the top of the segment, who broke the FBS record for sacks. And the reason I didn't pick him, I want someone who's done – we all know about Jalen Ferguson and what he's done. I also want to actually bring up Ferguson to Dane Brugler, who we're going to have on the podcast in a few moments, just because it's sort of like his pre-draft process has been very quiet since he was not able to participate in the workouts at the Combine. So I went with someone else from Old Dominion, O'Shane Simonez, someone who we got to see at the Senior Bowl, a 2-time captain, 2-time all-conference player down there for Old Dominion. Was the first player in Monarchs history to be invited to the Senior Bowl, also on the all-academic team. So from a character standpoint, very, very good. But then you look at the production, 33 sacks, nothing to sniff at, but 51 tackles for loss, also 11 forced fumbles. So very disruptive, coming off the edge for the Monarchs, and someone who teams, whether you're 4-3 or 3-4, both schemes, teams that run both schemes are looking at Jimenez as a potential fit at the next level.
Yeah, he's an intriguing player. Has really, and again, you're checking off boxes with him in terms of what he can bring to the table. A little bit up and down on film, but a guy that you could definitely see the traits with for sure. And I believe he was a multi-year captain.
2 years, yeah. So the last 2 years on campus there. So 6 players who had ridiculous production at the college level. That's our pick 6. Coming up next, this is going to be a fun one. Our Mr. Relevant, Dane Brugler from The Athletic.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
This is going to be one of the best Mr. Relevant segments of the Journey to Draft process, leading up to the draft, because we have Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who has done a phenomenal job for years of working the film himself to cultivate and develop his own draft guide, come up with his own scouting reports, his own list. This guy does the work, and now he's doing it for The Athletic. No surprise whatsoever. You can follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. And Dane, we want to kick things off with the bit of the news from a draft standpoint from over the weekend. Montez Sweat. Okay, it's been revealed that he has a heart condition. What insight do you have about it, and how do you think that that's going to impact his draft stock?
Yeah, so I first heard about Sweat's heart diagnosis last week, and so I reached out to different contacts in the league, tried to get more information, just trying to figure out how serious is it, how are teams reacting to the diagnosis, and I learned way more about the human heart in the different conditions than I ever thought, which I guess is not a bad thing, when you think about your own life, but it was interesting, the different opinions and different things I got from teams. And here are the main bullet points. It's the same heart condition that Maurice Hurst was diagnosed with last year. However, doctors, at least with the teams that I talked to, are way more optimistic about Sweat because he doesn't have any past episodes. His family doesn't have any past episodes with the heart condition, which wasn't the case with Hurst. So right there, he is at a lower risk than Hurst was last year. I talked to several teams that removed Maurice Hurst from their draft board a year ago, but they said Sweat would still be on their draft board this year, and they would still draft him. One of the teams said that they think he could fall a little bit, and that's possible, but it'd be really impossible to guess because each team handles these situations so differently. So it's basically a good news, bad news thing. Bad news, it's the same heart diagnosis as Hurst, but the good news is teams do it at a much lower risk, and it's something that is going to require frequent checkups, but it won't remove him from draft boards. So situations like this are tough because all 32 teams are going to handle it differently, but this shouldn't be a free-fall situation for Sweat like we saw for Hurst last year.
All right, so we wanted to bring you on, Dane, because you just revealed your most recent top 100 list for The Athletic, your top 100 big board. And take me through sort of the process. One thing I'm intrigued by, and you did a phenomenal job, obviously writing a scouting report on each player, providing their workout numbers from the combine, height, weight, etc. Who was the toughest player to leave off the list? When you got to whittling down this list to 100, how tough was it to be like, I really want to include this guy. This guy deserves some praise. This guy should be on here. Who were some of those guys that were, 101 and 102 maybe per se on your board?
Yeah, there's always a few guys that you hate leaving off any list, no matter how long the list is. And so when I was done with my top 100, mapping it out, there were a few late third-round grades that I had given that just I didn't have any room for, especially offensive skill guys. At running back, Juan Williams, he just missed. He has a pinball between the tackles, runs with toughness. At tight end, I really like Josh Oliver from San Jose State. I thought he was deserving of a spot, but he just missed. I loved what he did as a senior. And he played for a bad team, but he really shined. 68% of his catches went for first downs or touchdowns. I think his best football is ahead of him. At receiver, Penny Hart, fantastic slot option. Jalen Hurd, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, these guys are players that I like. I just, I didn't find room for them in my top 100. On defense, Max Crosby from Eastern Michigan is a player who I think once he gets into an NFL strength and conditioning program, I think he's going to blossom. Has starter potential. And then one small school player that I hated to leave off was Trey Pipkins from Sioux Falls. I think he's the top D2 player on my board, and history tells us there's an average of about 5 small school players, non-FBS players, drafted in the first 3 rounds every year, and only 3 small school guys made my top 100. So I think Pipkins was definitely worthy as well.
So, Dane, one question I love asking people is, who's a player that's flying under the radar right now? Who is a potential first-round prospect that not enough people are mentioning in their mock drafts and in that first-round discussion right now?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily breaking news or anything, but I think the 2 interior linemen, NC State's Garret Bradbury, A&M's Eric McCoy, I think both these guys are plug-and-play starters. And both have a good chance to go in the first round. With Bradbury, he'll get bullied by power at times, but he has exceptional quickness. He plays with technique. He can replace his hands. He can tie up rushers. Really smart. Love his vision, his awareness. And it's funny because he was a tight end in high school. And one of the, a lot of schools wanted him to move to the offensive line. One of the reasons he went to NC State is they gave him a shot at tight end, but he quickly moved once he got there, first to defense, then to the offensive line. And I'd say it's working out okay for him now. He could go as early as the teens in the first round. And then with McCoy, I don't think he's necessarily as gifted as Bradbury, but he's rock solid across the board, balanced, efficient in his movements. Sometimes quickness will get him, power will get him, but you never see him make a mental mistake. And the great thing for evaluators is you can watch him against Clemson and Dexter Lawrence, or Alabama and Quentin Williams, Mississippi State, Jeffrey Simmons. So the tape is all there, and he held his own. You add in guard center versatility, and the fact that it's just not really a strong year in the top 3 rounds for those positions, and I think McCoy could easily sneak into the top 25, kind of like Frank Ragnow last year.
All right, Dane, everyone loves mocks, and, of course, Eagles fans want to know who's being mocked to the Eagles at number 25, and certainly this would be a popular pick because he's a native of Philadelphia. He plays college ball not too far from Philly at the University of Delaware, and that's Nasir Adderley, the versatile defensive back. What's your thought process in terms of mocking Adderley to the Eagles at 25?
Yeah, the feedback from Eagles fans has been mostly mixed, I think, that I've received on this projection. And, the thought process is simple. It's never a bad plan to add a playmaker to your secondary, especially a versatile talent like Adderley, who has the athleticism to play single high. He has the toughness. He can walk down, play near the box. He was a corner his first 2 years at Delaware before moving back to safety. That's where he played in high school. He doesn't have maybe an ideal body type for the position. I think his playing weight's right around 200 pounds. But he's a guy that he plays aggressive, he plays tough, and he's going to make plays on tape. And he's also an outstanding character guy. He is the exact type of person that you want representing your franchise. So I don't think you could go wrong with Adderley in the late first round.
Staying at defensive back, Dane, you have a guy really high on your list that I'm a big fan of as well, and that's Shawn Bunting, the corner from Central Michigan. We talked about him earlier in the show with Tony, but why is he a legitimate day 2 option in your mind?
Yeah, and Bunting has been a player who has been really a consistent, one of those guys where you just, man, I don't have him high enough. That just, it keeps popping into your head. And I hadn't watched really any of him until he declared early as a junior in December, one of the first guys to declare early. Popped on the tape, really impressed, thought he was a potential mid-round guy. But then, the more you watch him, you see him at the combine, and you're like, okay, this guy's better than this. I don't have him high enough. For my top 100, he came in at number 84 overall, solid third-round grade. But even that doesn't feel right. And then I watched his pro day tape last week and realized it definitely wasn't right. He belongs in the second round. That's kind of where my grade is, and I think it's where he's going to be drafted. I love the athleticism that he shows. He's agile-footed, easy hip action, not always under control, but he's always balanced, if that makes sense. The long speed helps him recover. He can carry receivers vertically. I love his length, the ball skills, the natural sense that he has playing the football. And this is a player who was a no-star guy out of high school. He was going to go Division II until Central Michigan entered the picture with a gray shirt opportunity. He wasn't sure if he'd be a receiver or a corner. He actually started at safety, but I'm buying the tape that he put together this past year, 2018. He needs to get stronger, improve the discipline, but I think he often runs better routes than the receiver does that he's covering, and I love the compete that he shows from snap to finish. So I think he's definitely put himself in the top 50 mix.
All right, Dane, staying in the state of Michigan, but certainly not a small school prospect, is Roshan, the defensive lineman from the University of Michigan. And he's been mocked pretty much by everyone to go in the top 10 of this draft. But reading your scouting report of him, it was very intriguing that you definitely brought up some concerns, some potential red flags for as to why teams may need to be cautious if they select him with a top 10 selection.
Yeah, I think like most evaluators, I struggle with Gary because the traits, they're certainly appealing. For a 280-pounder, he moves extremely well, plays with power. All the talent is there to be a Pro Bowler, but he doesn't show a consistent plan when he's rushing. His move-to-move transition is immature, and I constantly found myself yelling finish when I was watching his tape. So, the scouts that I've talked to about Gary, they also have questions about his emotional maturity. He knows he's really talented, and that's kind of how it comes off in just simple conversation. So all these variables really make it tough to stamp a final grade on his report. So I wouldn't be surprised if he snuck into the top 5 or if he fell out of the top 10 altogether. I think teams are really going to be split on Gary and kind of where he stacks up with this loaded defensive line class. A team's going to bite early on. It's just it's a complicated evaluation to say the least, and so definitely an interesting test case, not only in the draft but as we track his NFL future going forward.
I want to stay with the Wolverines for the next question here, Dane. And you have Devin Bush, the linebacker from Michigan, I believe rated ahead of Devin White. Talk about those two guys and how they compare to each other.
Watching Bush's tape throughout the year and into the off season, I found myself getting too hung up on the lack of size. You would see it when you watch the tape. He struggled to consistently shed once he got locked up. The lack of inches would lead to broken tackles, but I loved basically everything else. And then after watching him at the combine, I told myself I need to focus on what does he do really, really well and not get too hung up on the lack of elite size measurements. And so where would I put him? Just based on what he does really well. And that's why he came in at number 12 overall in my draft board, 2 spots ahead of White, who I like a lot. But when you look at Bush, plug him in as a will linebacker and just let him hunt. The diagnose skills, the reaction to quickness, closing speed, it's all special. It's really like you're watching linebacker coaching tape. And I like White too, but I just trust Bush better in coverage. And when I compared both of them to Roquan Smith from last year, who is one of the highest linebacker grades I've ever given, Bush was closer to that type of player and that type of grade. So I would have no trouble drafting him in the top 10 picks and plugging him into my defense and feeling really confident about the player that I'm adding. And I like White as well. I just give Bush the edge.
All right, Dana, we've talked about some of the defensive backs already, but overall, it's not a real deep cornerback group. However, you do have Byron Murphy of Washington as a top 20 prospect in this draft class. What's your scouting report on him?
Yeah, and the only DB to make my top 20, I believe. In the conversation with Murphy, it's somewhat similar to Devin Bush. He might not have the ideal corner size, speed measurement that you're looking for, and obviously 2 very important traits when you're studying the position. But when you watch the tape, the mental processing, the transition technique, the ball skills, the competitive toughness, all well above average. And for a player with only 20 games on his resume, his instincts, his recognition, I think are really advanced for his age. So if you can get past the fact that he's a hair under 5'11", he's only a 4.55 athlete, I think you have a heck of a corner. And truthfully, a lot of teams, they're going to be hung up on those numbers. Corner is a stopwatch position. We know that. And 4.55 in the 40, that's going to scare away some teams. So I'd be willing to bet on his either pattern matching coverage, make plays on football. I have a lot of confidence in Byron Murphy being a solid player for you at a premium position. So he's not Denzel Ward. He's not a player that I think should be considered that high. But once you get into the mid to late first round, Byron Murphy I think would be a solid pick.
Well, and that's why it's really interesting, Dan. You've got Byron Murphy at 20. You've got Justin Lane, the corner from Michigan State, at 28. And I think those two, they have very combative skill sets, right? I mean, you look at Byron Murphy. To me, if you took his instincts and you took his competitiveness and you put them inside Justin Lane, you're talking like top 5, top 10 pick, because Justin Lane is long, he's athletic, he can run. He's got some of those things that people knock a Byron Murphy for. Tell us what you like about Justin Lane.
Yeah, that's a great point. And with Lane, he's really interesting because he was a big-time recruit out of Cleveland. He bypassed offers from Ohio State, Alabama, to go to Michigan State as a receiver. And so he played both ways as a freshman before moving to defense full-time as a sophomore. Like you said, he's big, he's athletic. He has over an 80-inch wingspan, which is rare for a corner. To put that 80-inch wingspan in perspective, center Eric McCoy, who we talked about earlier, his wingspan is only 77 3/4 inches. So you look at Lane, he has a lot of the size measurements you want. He's a terrific athlete. 4.50, 40 is, good, not great. But 6.90 with a 3-cone is terrific, especially for a corner who's 6'2", 192 pounds. The jumps were really impressive at the combine. And then when you watch him on film, I think you see an ascending player. I think his key and diagnose skills took a big jump his junior year compared to what he showed as a sophomore. I think he needs to play with better footwork in his transition, play with better spacing, understand, so he improve his route recognition. But I think he can mirror and match from press, and I think he has natural ball skills. So I'm going to bet on those traits, and that's why I included him in my top 30. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we end up hearing his name called Thursday night of the draft, and he's off the board in the first round.
Wow, Dane, we started with edge rushers, talking about Montez Sweat. I want to leave with arguably the most productive in college football history in terms of sacks, and that's Jalen Ferguson of Louisiana Tech, and we had a chance to see him at the Senior Bowl. He wasn't allowed to participate in the combine because of a previous off-field incident. I sort of feel like that his name is gotten lost in the mix. I don't know if it's because of the tape. Is it because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind from the combine standpoint? What's your take on Jalen Ferguson and his draft stock and what's going on with him?
Yeah, it's kind of a reminder of the ebbs and flows of draft season and the media. In January, I thought he was actually being overrated by many in the media because he would pop up in the first round of mock drafts, and you talked about as a potential top 25 pick, and I don't know, I didn't see that type of player. But then things cooled down at the Senior Bowl, after the Senior Bowl, and then the combine with him not there, and partly because, like you said, it was out of sight, out of mind, and that's what happens with prospects. It's happening with my linebacker from Hawaii, Jelani Tavai, who hasn't been able to do anything because of his injury. So his name is pretty cool in terms of being talked about a lot. But with Ferguson, not being allowed to participate in Indy, which is a silly rule, but that's for another day. I think he might be actually underrated now, and so I'll be eager to see the workout numbers from his pro day because I don't think he's a top-tier athlete, but I love the violent speed to power rush that he has. He strikes with thump and pad level, physical hands. He's going to bully you, no problem going right through you. And like you said, I mean, he set the all-time record for sacks at the FBS level. He needed 17.5 this year, and that's exactly what he got with 2.5 sacks in the bowl game. So, and I think he improved in the run game as well. He'll show the ability to see through blocks, pursue, make plays. I have a late second-round grade on him, but I think there's a good chance he ends up going top 50 because he plays a premium position as a pass rusher, and he's kind of in that second tier of pass rushers. When you look at the position, these guys are going to fly off the board in the early first round, from Nick Bosa to Josh Allen, with Gary we talked about, Sweat we talked about, Brian Burns, Cleveland Farrell. And then that second tier, Jalen Ferguson's right there in that mix, and he plays the right position. So wouldn't be a surprise if he gets pushed up a little bit and maybe even goes as high as the top 40 or early second round, maybe even in the first.
So you mentioned how you kind of made Tavai a popular name in draft scouting circles on Twitter. Have you ever thought of just putting out a name just to see if it will automatically generate that type of buzz? Be like, if I just post one play of insert prospect name here, that all of a sudden he'll be in mock drafts and everyone will be talking about him?
Yeah, this lanky corner, McPherson from Saginaw Valley State. Yeah, I'm gonna put that out there and see if I can get anybody to bite. That would be interesting, but a little red herring out there. I like that idea.
I'll take lanky corner. That's perfectly fine by me. So 6'3", but no ball skills or speed whatsoever.
I'm not asking you what position you'd have me at.
I didn't use an example for a reason. You're a senior. I don't know what to do with you.
Dane Brugler from The Athletic. Look, click on the link to check out his Top 100 Big Board. And you might be saying to yourself, yes, The Athletic, it's a subscription service. Click on the link and use that to subscribe to The Athletic and turn that article into a home run. So, Dane Brugler, great work as always. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, we talked about some of the Senior Bowl prospects. Fran had a chance to catch up with one. Tyree Brady, the wide receiver from Marshall. Let's go to that interview in our unofficial visit.
The unofficial visit.
Here now with Marshall wide receiver Tyree Brady. And Tyree, for fans who have yet to watch you play, give us a quick scouting report of what you'll bring to the NFL.
Just a strong-handed catching receiver, go up and make the 50-50 ball more than usual, and smooth route runner, get in and out my breaks fast. So.
How much of winning in those 50-50 balls is physical and how much of it is mental?
I mean, you just got to have that mind. You got to have that mind state like, I'm going to get this football. It's my football, nobody's football. So going up and getting it, you got to get it. And then when it hits your hands, you got to make a play. As a receiver, if it touches your hands, you always taught you got to catch that ball. So you really got to take pride in that.
There's a few guys in the NFL that kind of have that my ball mentality, that ability to go up and win at the catch point. Is there one guy that you kind of look at and say, like, this guy is the best of the best?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Julio Jones is the best receiver.
Sure.
Definitely.
Are there any other guys? One guy watching you, we see Alshon Jeffrey every day.
Oh, yeah.
And Alshon, to me, like the way that you play, the way that you move, it's very, very similar to Alshon. Is he a player that you've kind of watched?
Oh, yeah, I definitely watched Alshon ever since he was at South Carolina. He a strong-handed receiver, and I like that about his game. He can go up and make them 50-50 balls, and I always model that part of my game, too. I love making those 50 tough catches like he do too. So,
is there one area of your game we're talking with scouts that you kind of have to improve and kind of prove yourself over the next couple of months?
Oh yeah, definitely. Just being out there, identify. A lot of teams they've been bracketing me, throwing a lot of funky coverages my way. So just getting those things down packed, seeing them from the jump, so it could get me open, so I can know where the holes at in the defense. So. Still be able to make plays.
What's the secret to getting off press coverage? I don't want you to give away too many of your secrets, but what's the key for a young receiver out there to get off press coverage?
You gotta take it as disrespect if a DB come up to you and press you, man. Like you gotta win, one-on-one matchup.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing to just see. Like there are some guys that win with their strength and their technique. Some guys are able to win with their feet. What's the easiest way for you? Do you kind of look at it like I'm just gonna kind of run through this contact, or do you try and win with technique? What's your go-to?
I mean, I switch it up. It depends on the DB, how the DB plays. When I watch film, I'll figure out. Then I like to switch it up on them. Don't keep it one way for them. So different ways.
All right, and who's the best corner that you faced this year?
Best corner, let's see. I got a lot of bracket and triple coverage, so it was pretty hard. Right. Yeah.
All right, well, I'll let you off the hook on that one. Well, Tyree, best of luck the rest of this week, and then also the next couple of months here throughout the draft process.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans.
Last but not least, a segment that has grown and gotten so much better over the last couple of weeks. You got to kind of save the best for last. You got to kind of reel the fans in with this one, our draft mailbag. And as we say each and every week here, if you leave a comment, leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, we'll get to those questions first. We're going top of the board here. Richard from Apple Podcasts, I believe a regular contributor. I recognize the name.
That's right. Yep.
Someone who's left us questions before. Everyone wants to know about the running back position. Of course, from an Eagles standpoint, that seems to be the one position that has not yet been addressed in free agency as we sit here on this Monday. From a draft standpoint, can you give me a couple of poor man's Josh Jacobs, guys who can do it all well enough and should be available third day, 4th to 6th rounds? Richard, thinking that Jacobs will not be there at number 25 and doesn't know if the Eagles will take him, even if he is there.
It's just valid, I think both of those are valid.
Certainly.
So this one I actually didn't even think about before the show. Usually I try and think like, all right, who am I going to talk about?
Yeah.
So Rodney Anderson is a guy you wouldn't even say is a poor man's Josh Jacobs. There's a guy that, if healthy, would be right in the discussion with Josh Jacobs as one of the top backs in this class. I mean, he is the total package but the medical history is a huge, huge thing. And I mean, 3 season-ending injuries in 4 seasons, that's tough to swallow, and that's going to knock him down board. So to me, Rodney Anderson is an easy one. As far as guys that, look, there's a reason why running backs that have that skill set go high. It's tough to say, oh, this guy's a poor man's Josh Jacobs, because there's going to be holes in all these guys, right? But like Rypien Armstead is a guy that, from Temple, bigger back, physical, downhill player, has a good size-speed combination, can do a lot of different things for you on third down as well. Not the level of player, obviously, that Josh Jacobs is, but if you're looking for a poor man's version, why not go with the local kid?
What about like a Myles Gaskin from Washington?
He's just so small. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the difference there is Gaskin is a much smaller player. So, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh yeah, poor man's Josh Jacobs, because Jacobs is a bigger
kid.
I'm
looking at someone who can do a little of everything type thing for an offense. So, all right. So next question, also from Apple Podcast, comes from Wild Farm Wines, and we got to get some kind of sponsorship. I need to get on top of that one. So, surprised not to hear more about Miles Sanders after his lights-out combine. Is he a solid second rounder, or are his fumbling issues suppressing his value? Also, did Damien Harris drop to the 3rd day with his very average combine? Could he be there in the 4th round?
I would say that if Damien Harris drops to the 3rd day, someone's getting a steal. So I would be shocked if that happened. I don't think that he'll be there in the 4th round. I think he'll be a day 2 pick. As far as Sanders, first of all, the combine was good. It wasn't like completely.
It wasn't Saquon Barkley's or Troy Apke's or Mike. It's not the level that some of the Penn Staters have had in recent years.
It was good compared to the rest of the running back class.
Yes.
Is the big thing. Like, he was much better than the rest of the class in a lot of different areas in terms of being well-rounded. I think ultimately when you look at Miles Sanders, you see a guy that's is going to go day 2. I don't think he's a lock for the 2nd round. I think he could be a 3rd round pick. I want to continue to watch more, because there are a lot of intriguing things, and he is a well-rounded player. He can do a lot of different things for you. I remember 5-star recruit coming out of high school. I mean,
was he the National Player of the Year?
I believe so. And he just got stuck behind Saquon Barkley. So I think when you look at Miles Sanders, you see a guy that's got the potential to be a 3-down back. Just a small sample size. And I know he was a little bit banged up starting around midseason as well.
Yeah. The thing is, if you have someone who's that talented, don't you find a way to get him? Even if you have, you have Saquon, but find a way to get him on the field with him at the same time. All right, next question comes from Twitter @_MattB2000. Should the Eagles draft an interior offensive lineman in the 1st or later rounds, since Jason Kelce is playing maybe his final 2 years and just signed Seumalo to be our left guard for the foreseeable future? So your thoughts on the interior O-line situation for the Eagles?
I think this team is always looking to address offensive line, right? I mean, that's been one of the staples since Doug Peterson was brought in, Howie Roseman, when he was put back into making the decisions at the head of the football operations department. You look at the offensive line, that's how the best teams are built. So every year, you saw last year, they went in, and it might not be an early pick. It might not be Isaac Seumalo in the 3rd round. It might not be Lane Johnson in round 1. But you go and you take a Matt Pryor, you take a Jordan Mailata. You're always trying to add an influx of talent into the interior or up to the offensive line, whether it's a tackle, guard, or center. So, yeah, I mean, I think that you can look at it and say they're probably going to draft an offensive lineman. So I would be shocked if they didn't draft an offensive lineman at some point.
I feel like they've learned from the mistakes of not addressing that in the draft a couple years ago. The big thing from just a depth standpoint is, who's your backup center? I mean, you would figure it's probably Seumalo, but if he's locked into being your left guard, should something happen to Kelce, how are you going to disrupt the line? Are you going to move someone else into center? They don't really have that one, since Stefan Wisniewski is now a free agent and not coming back in 2019. So
Chance Warmack's a free agent. Wisniewski's a free agent. Brandon Brooks is coming off the injury.
Yeah.
So
there's
question marks. But it's still very, very early in the league year.
Matt Pryor is going to have a big offseason for the Eagles.
Yeah.
He's kind of the guy under the microscope to see what is he going to be down the line, and that's going to, I think, help shape some of the thinking for what the Eagles front office does when it comes to the draft. All right, @Shawn Wolford wants to know, who are the best interior O-linemen in the draft who are not offensive tackles predicted to move inside?
So this was a tough one from Shawn because, yeah, there are tackles that are being projected to move inside, but a lot of those guys have played inside before. So it's not just, oh, this is a big slug, a tackle. He can't play on the outside. He's got to play inside.
Yeah.
You know, you can look at Cody Ford. Yeah, played right tackle this year, but was the left guard the year before. Dalton Reisner. Yeah, right tackle this year, but he was a guard and center in years past. I mean, there are a lot of guys that have that positional versatility, and honestly, teams are looking for that positional versatility, that ability to be able to play multiple positions, not a knock. So I stayed away from those guys, and here are the list of guys that I came up with that I thought were the best interior O-linemen in this class. Garret Bradbury, who has played both guard and center for NC State, should be a first-round pick. Probably, I mean, he probably could be off the board by 25.
Certainly.
Seems like things are pointing that way. Eric McCoy from Texas A&M, starting to get a lot of buzz. Seems like he'll be a second-round pick from Texas A&M. Another guy, guard center versatility, has been a center, rock solid player. I think he was my when I did the Senior Bowl preview, or was the combine? It was the combine preview. I compared him to Ryan Kelly, the Pro Bowl center for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yep.
So a guy that I've been a big fan of throughout the course of the process. Eric McCoy from Texas A&M, again, probably a second-round pick. Alton Jenkins from Mississippi State. We saw him down at the Senior Bowl. Again, another guy with positional versatility. He's got tackle reps under his belt. He's played tackle, guard, and center the past 2 years. I do like Alton Jenkins, not as the upside's probably not as high as these other two guys, but just a rock-solid player across the board. Same thing I would say for Bo Benshaw from Wisconsin, has been a right guard, I think, for the last 4 years for the Badgers. Started as a young guy and then worked his way up and has kind of just stayed there at right guard, but big physical guy on the inside. And then Nate Davis, a player that I really liked when I watched him back in the fall from Charlotte. Athletic kid, flashed at the Senior Bowl, can do a lot of different things for you. But he is a guy that it had been a college tackle, but probably going to move inside the guard. But he, again, another guy who does have some guard experience.
So there you go. 5 names right there. Bradbury, McCoy, Alton Jenkins, Benshaw, and Nate Davis.
Yeah.
Great question there from Shawn. Next question from @SC Eagles fan. The best, and he puts this in here, and most realistic quarterback prospect available for the Eagles in rounds 4 to 6 to develop.
So the one guy I didn't put on the list was Tyree Jackson, even though I would evaluate him this way. Adam Schefter tweeted out.
I was just going to note this, yes.
Late in the week last week that he was going to go, I think it was earlier than people think, was the quote.
The question now is, when do people think he's going?
My guess is that means he's going to be a day 2 pick, which I don't think the film dictates a guy that's a day 2 pick.
But is it more the fact he's 6'7", has the
big guy
the physical
with a big
traits?
No question. That you can try and develop. So the guys that I put down, there's a bunch of them because I think when you get outside of like that top tier, there's a little bit of a drop. That's why this quarterback class isn't viewed as the strongest. And then there's a bunch of guys that are all kind of jumbled up, and it's just going to be a matter of which guys fall. I think there are traits to like with all these guys. Will Grier, Gardner Minshew from Washington State. I like Ryan Finley from NC State a lot. Good timing and rhythm guy. Pretty accurate. Good touch. Comes from a pro style offense.
Why is he not getting more buzz?
The arm talent isn't great, and he's not a great athlete. So that's right. He's not the most physically assuming kid. I mean, there's knocks on him from that standpoint. Clayton Thorson absolutely looks the part. Arm talent isn't the greatest in the world. The accuracy could be better. The arm is solid, not great, but an intriguing player for sure, especially with his size and movement. Brett Rypien, we talked about him earlier in the show. I like both Brett Rypien and Easton Stick. Both guys are a little bit smaller. Both guys are 4-year starters, come from pro-style systems, accuracy, touch, toughness in the pocket. I like both of those players and guys that I think should stick in the NFL for a long time. The wild card, I think, is Jarrett Stidham, and a player that you are banking on his best football being ahead of him because the stuff that you saw at Auburn, number one, the system does not translate well to the NFL at all. I mean, he's not asked to do anything that he's asked to do. Didn't really execute that offense really at a high level much at all. But the tools are all there. He was one of the best throwers at the Combine. Senior Bowl, one quarterback of the week down there. I mean, he's really helped himself in this pre-draft process. So if someone falls in love with him as a developmental player, like if Jarrett Stidham goes off the board in the 3rd round, I wouldn't be shocked, but I would say the film does not dictate it. Does not show a guy that would be a 3rd round pick. You're going all off potential. So Stidham is a guy that could be a wild card because teams could view him a certain way. But he's a guy that if you're a team like the Eagles and you're looking for a 3rd quarterback to develop, that's an intriguing name.
Yeah, we'll be wondering to see if they'll add a veteran. There really isn't one on the market. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick was thrown out there, but You know, the Dolphins have signed him to be the starter.
Fish magic.
Yeah, Fitzmagic. Exactly.
Fish magic.
Fish magic. I like that.
That's from Justice Mosqueda. That's a good one on Twitter.
I was wondering if you had pulled that
I
out
couldn't come up
yourself.
with that one. Come on.
All right, next question from @Benaminino on Twitter. What's the likelihood of Jeffrey Simmons being on the board at number 25? Character ACL issues aside, he would be scary lining up next to Fletcher Cox.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln.
Exactly. You know, so for me, I think he'll be on the board, even though I believe Dane Brugler has him in his mock draft still going in the first round. I believe Charles Davis put out a post-free agency mock draft on NFL.com. He has him still going the first round.
Yep.
So talent-wise, yes, because you figure if you give him a redshirt year, he can develop. And I would agree with the whole aspect that you would love to have someone, even after the addition of Malik Jackson. That doesn't preclude the Eagles from going and adding someone else of that type of player. The character issue, that's something that teams obviously have to work out. The fact that it's documented on video certainly doesn't help his cause, but apparently by all accounts, he's been a model citizen in his time at Mississippi State, and those coaches will go to bat for him. But to me, it seems like he'll be there. Personally, I feel like the Eagles are not going to want to take a redshirt player at number 25 this year. That's a gut feeling on my end here.
And I think, too, when it comes to a guy like this, ultimately it's a question. You got to put it on the scale, right? How much does his talent outweigh the fact that, A, you're not going to see him for a year, and B, you're going to have to deal with that initial hit?
Correct.
I mean, that's where the scale comes into play. Like, okay, he's got to be an A. You have to believe that he is an A-plus talent at a position that is, number one, very deep in this draft, and number two, you know, people don't view defensive tackle, especially guys that are maybe like run-stuffy defensive tackles, as like super, super high priority. So he's got to be like an A++ talent to overcome those two big albatrosses that are going to be hanging around his neck. I mean, that's a tall task.
All right, next question comes from @TheBigEasy24. Who is a player you would hate? I like this question a lot, actually.
He's from a Cowboys fan.
Okay. Well,
this is a great question.
Do we have to answer it?
Yes, we do. I think it's a great question.
All right. Who is a player you would hate to see fall to the Cowboys at number 58? So
I picked three guys.
All right.
Jay Sternberger, the tight end from Texas A&M, and I would hate to see him fall there, not because I would think the Eagles are going to take him, but because I think he's a really good player. We'll see if they decide, maybe Jason Witten is just, he solves all issues for them at the tight end spot. But Jay Sternberger, to me, would be a guy that I wouldn't want to see end up in a Dallas uniform.
Okay.
Now, these are two guys I think will go before 58 that I think I would not want those guys to fall. Deebo Samuel, the wide receiver from South Carolina, is a player that I've liked for a long time. Was one of my top seniors entering the season. I think he'll probably be an early second-round pick at this point in the process. And then Taylor Rapp from Washington, the strong safety. They're looking for a player to kind of solidify that entire secondary. I would hate to see Taylor Rapp end up there. And to me, like a guy that would fit so well with, Byron Jones and the rest of that group, replace Jeff Heath in the starting lineup. Taylor Rapp's a first-round talent. I think he's a guy, like, if the Eagles decided to pull the trigger on him at 25, sign me up. I like Taylor Rapp and everything that he brings to the table. So, to me, Taylor Rapp is a guy that if he were to fall to 58, like that would worry me.
Those are three good options. Samuel, I'm just thinking as a compliment to Amari Cooper there.
Yeah.
And, given another option there in the pass game, especially after they're going to need to address slot with Cole Beasley being gone,
no
obviously.
question.
But, no, those are three intriguing options there that you wouldn't want to see fall to.
Well, let me bounce this back to you. What about the Giants and the Washington team? Who are some guys? Obviously, they have picks in the first round. The Giants have two. Washington's got one in the first round. So, of those, they're going to get players that are good players. I mean, good talented players.
Certainly. Giants, I'm thinking edge rusher, and if they figure out the quarterback situation, if they believe that,
I'm okay with them taking a quarterback if he doesn't work out.
Of course, certainly. I'm thinking edge rusher first and foremost would probably be the one area where, like, I'm trying to think if they were to pick like a Cleveland Farrell or someone like that.
Yep.
In the first round, so someone who obviously can impact the Eagles' offense from that standpoint, especially considering Olivier Vernon is gone. So that's going to be a position of need for them to address. Really, that you figured somewhere along the defensive line. they're going to have to address with one of those 2 first-round picks.
Washington did it to me last year with Deron Payne. That was a guy. Like I would have said, yeah, I don't want Deron Payne to end up in the division. Certainly not to Washington, and he ended up there. Trying to think of a guy that would make sense for them. You would say pass rusher. They lose Preston Smith in free agency to Green Bay. Corner. I'm okay with them taking any of the corners. I'm trying to think if there's a player. I'll tell you what. Devin Bush. I wouldn't want to see Devin Bush go to Washington.
The linebacker was coming to mind. I was just wondering, would he fit what they want to do on defense? But yes, that would be.
They let go of Zach Brown. They're looking to overhaul that position. That would be one I would want to see.
Someone who can fly sideline to sideline.
No question.
Very, very ridiculous there. So, especially you don't want, especially when you consider Dallas has very good linebackers in division. You don't need another team
because they've got Reuben Foster as well.
Well,
yeah, if he plays.
If he plays, exactly. Our last question here comes from @TManic21. It's a good question here. It's more tape study, philosophical standpoint.
Yeah.
When watching a safety, how much emphasis are you putting on their ability when going out of phase to in phase to turn and locate the ball versus playing through the catch point? They often end up on a slot receiver whose speed they can't match. Thus, shouldn't making the tackle, be the top priority or the pass breakup?
Good question. So, first of all, I'll take you through it real quick. Out of phase means that you're kind of in recovery mode, right? And that's the corner trying to catch up to a receiver on a vertical route, and he's got his eyes on the receiver, trying to play through. Everyone says like, oh, he's got to turn his head around. No, like he's trying to get back into position to get turn his head around. So that's out of phase. In phase is when he's hip to hip with the receiver and he's able to look back and find the football. So in terms of the ability to locate the football. Look, it depends on the kind of safety, right? I mean, if you are a safety like a Malcolm Jenkins that's going to be played up in the slot and is going to be used that way, yeah, like you do kind of need him to be able to have those ball skills to be able to find the ball late downfield. If you're Rodney McLeod and you're playing mostly in the post and that's how you're going to be used, you may not look at that as a huge trait that you need to have because you're not going to be put in those situations to, where you're going to be manned up in the slot and have to run vertically with the receiver. So ultimately, it's going to be a team-by-team thing and what they're looking for at that safety spot. If they're looking for a guy that can play in the slot, yeah, like he's going to need to have those kind of ball skills like a corner. That's why a guy like Nazir Adderley does have a lot of intrigue, why Juan Thornhill does have a lot of intrigue, because they've got that experience in their back pocket, the ability to go and find the football. Even though it may not be against the speedsters on the outside, yeah, if you need them to match up to a guy in the slot, they can do it. That can be something that's in their toolbox.
But I know you like Taylor Rapp more than those guys. So what's your checklist?
Well, it just depends. That's the thing.
I'm more looking at just from you're studying the film on the safeties overall.
Well, number one, Taylor Rapp began his career as a nickel corner. He's got that, and he has continued to do that. So he's got that in his repertoire as well. But ultimately, when I'm looking at safeties, I'm looking at them and put them all in one group. Like, this is how I feel about all safeties. But if I'm a team, number one, I'm going to have it split up into free safety, strong safety, buzz safety, whatever terms that I've got in terms of how I'm utilizing them on my team. I'm going to group them all differently. All those guys are going to be all spread out. So that's probably the short answer to that question.
All right. Great stuff as always. Phenomenal questions. And I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Journey to the Draft podcast. Once again, special thanks to our guests, Tony Pauline from draftanalyst.com and Dane Brugler from The Athletic. And a special shout out to Melissa Kelly, who is doing outstanding work behind the glass to help make this podcast happen. For Fran Duffy, I'm Chris McPherson. We'll be back next week as we get closer to the 2019 NFL Draft.